Hi, my name is Tim Hall, and I'm standing in front of a photograph of the great jazz musician Louis Armstrong. It was taken in St. Louis by my good friend Bob Cameron. And when Bob made an 8x10 of this for Mr. Armstrong, he said, "This is the best picture ever taken of me actually playing. All them other ones were just me holding the trumpet up to my lips." I'm here to ask you for help towards the dismantling of my current facilities and the rebuilding of a photographic darkroom so that I can continue to make fine art photographs such as this one. If you help me in my Kickstarter program and I meet my goal, I will forward to you a copy of this image. It is a fine shot of one of the greatest, if not the greatest, innovators of American popular music, and his contribution towards jazz and music in general cannot be overstated. I recently forwarded a copy of this print to Mr. Ken Burns, the documentary photographer. And he wrote back saying, "Dear Mr. Hall, I don't have words to express my thanks for this photograph of my God, Louis Armstrong. I will treasure it, and I hope these words help. I hope all lovers of photography will help Timothy Hall in his new venture to launch a fine art black and white photographic printing resource. We need it, the world needs it." So if you'd like to hear more about how you can attain a print of this, please listen and watch the following slideshow. Thank you. In 1941, Robert Cameron was invited to a performance by Louis Armstrong. The band was told by their leader that Bob would be allowed on stage and to move freely among them with his camera. Mr. Armstrong often called Bob Mr. Cameraman. Trained as an aerial photographer during World War II, Bob shot with a 4x5 handheld press camera that night. It was fitted with a slow-burning flash bulb, and he had to change both the film and the bulb after each exposure. When speaking about the shot of Louis blowing his horn, Bob was especially proud of the fact that one can see the saliva dripping down his face. When I first saw this photograph in Bob's office, I immediately recognized the importance of it. And I was surprised I had not seen it before, but I also noticed the lack of detail in the handkerchief. Being a photographer myself, I knew the reason why. The harsh lighting from the flash bulb overexposed the white handkerchief. And I knew I could make a better print if I was ever given the chance. A few months later, Bob handed me the original 4x5 negative and asked me to produce a dozen prints for him. I was both honored and elated. A darkroom technique called film masking was something I had experimented with in the late 1970s. Even then, it was not widely taught, and I had to learn it from reading books written on the subject of color separation films. Masking was actually devised as a method for color correction. They were typically made through colored filters and used during the color separation process. The use of a mask effectively lowered the contrast of the print and added detail throughout the range of tones. After learning how to mask color-positive films, or transparencies as they are called, I figured that I could apply the same technique for color or black and white negatives, except that the mask would work on the opposite end of the grayscale. Normally, a mask adds density to the lighter areas of a color transparency, but a mask made for negative films would add density to the shadow areas and thereby show more detail. A byproduct of this procedure is that not only do you achieve more detail in the shadows, but you can also get much more detail in the lighter areas. In short, I knew I could get the detail out of the handkerchief of the Louis Armstrong image if I made a heavy enough mask. I worked on the Armstrong negative and produced a much better black and white print. This was back in 2007. I felt that I could do better still, but since I was busy with other work, I kept the thought in my head and did not venture forth. Then, in 2009, Robert Cameron passed away at the age of 98. He left me his cameras and original films and told me to continue to offer his images for acquisition. It seems he paid over, according to him, $1 million in helicopter fees alone in order to photograph from the air. He, after all, was best known as the publisher and photographer of the above series of books, and he had books ranging from San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Seattle, Monterey, Paris, London, Hawaii, Yosemite, and so on. A couple of years ago, I had thought of a way to better prepare the Louis Armstrong negative for printing, but I didn't get to try it until a few months ago. I went back to the drawing board, so to speak, and remade masks that reached into the highlights, and I was most pleased with the results. And then I was informed that the building I occupied would be torn down and new condominiums would be built. Faced with the prospect of moving and building yet another color lab, I had to think about how to proceed. It is, after all, very costly to move and remodel a new location in order to make large color photographic prints. In the end, it is much easier and cheaper to offer inkjet prints, and that is the reason why there are fewer and fewer color labs to be found. And that brings me to this point in time. I am starting this Kickstarter campaign to help finance my move out of my current location and to build a black and white photographic printing facility, a much more affordable task. I will be making fine art black and white photographs for collectors and aficionados. If you contribute towards this project, I will forward to you photographs from a collection of 4 images I've chosen from the library of Robert Cameron. The lead image will be the Louis Armstrong image. Every print I make will utilize the masking technique that I have honed over the years. The challenge with masking is that it produces a pre-visualized image. You must have a clear vision of what you want to achieve. The masks are made accordingly. In the case of the 3 Cameron images, besides the Armstrong one, I will be working from 2 1/4 by 2 3/4 transparencies. By utilizing colored filters, you can affect the final tones of the black and white fine print. You also travel up and down the grayscale, or zones as some call them, with the use of first stage masks before making the final masks for the making of the black and white internegative. Then, the internegative is also masked. The resulting print can be drastically different from making conventional prints without the aid of masking. Ultimately, the success of the print depends on how the viewer responds when seeing the print. Bob often told me how excited he was when photographing from the air. Often he wouldn't be able to sleep until he saw the processed films. That feeling he had when he chose to squeeze the shutter, that's the feeling I hope to transmit to you, the viewing audience, when you receive the prints I make. It is how a photographic print can become the equivalent of the experience of being there.